Welcome to the deep dive.
Hmm.
This is where we take something that looks, well, almost simple on the surface, and we pull on that thread until hopefully we uncover something much bigger, much more intricate. Today, we're kind of embarking on a mission that it might sound almost deceptively straightforward.
Right.
But I promise you, it's really going to challenge how you think about information itself. Okay, so let's unpack this. We often think knowledge comes from these huge, complex sources, right? Vast data sets, long reports.
Sure, the big stuff.
Exactly. But sometimes the most profound insights, those little aha moments, they can genuinely stem from like the barest flicker of data.
It's often the case.
So our source material today, it's incredibly concise. We've got an excerpt from a document, and it's simply titled Pedestrian Sighting on Street. That's it.
Right. Not exactly War and Peace.
Not at all. And our challenge, our deep dive today, is to extract every single nugget of knowledge, every insight we possibly can from what looks like, a really minimalist piece of information. How much can we actually learn? How much can we infer, really understand from just, well, a few words? It's a fascinating thought experiment, I think, and one I'm really eager to explore with you.
Indeed it is. And this particular deep dive, it raises a really important question right from the get-go, doesn't it?
Which is?
What is the intrinsic value of an observation, especially when it seems, well, mundane, or maybe brief, when you just see it in isolation?
Yeah, like this one seems.
Exactly. So our goal today is to really dissect the fabric of information itself. We're not just looking at what was observed in this tiny source,
Right.
but critically how it was observed. And maybe even more importantly, what does it fundamentally mean for an observation like this, something so simple, to be considered worthy of recording?
Worthy of being written down as a piece of data.
Precisely. It challenges us, I think, to really get a handle on the core components of factual reporting, maybe even data generation, pushing us to find significance in, well, simplicity.
Finding the signal in the quiet.
You could say that, yeah.
Yeah.
It's about understanding that raw material before it gets, processed into those complex reports or predictions we mentioned earlier, the very starting point.
All right, then let's jump right into the core of it.
Yeah.
This source material, the excerpt from Pedestrian Sighting on Street, it gives us one single sentence, one observation, and it reads, "A man was spotted walking down the street." That's literally it.
5 words.
5 simple words. But, okay, here's where it gets really interesting, right? If we approach this not just as like a sentence in English, but as a data point, what questions pop up immediately?
The data lens. Okay.
Yeah. What are the implications hidden in these, seemingly straightforward terms? Let's try and break this fundamental statement down, not just linguistically, but
Yeah.
through that lens of data, of observation.
Okay. Yeah, what's fascinating here is precisely how concise that construction is. It is a statement of pure fact. It seems remarkably devoid of judgment, doesn't it? Or any extra context, as any embellishment, which actually, in the world of data, that's often the most valuable kind of raw input you can get.
Really? Why's that?
Well, it presents an event seemingly as it occurred, without interpretation layered on top immediately. So let's start by deconstructing the first bit. A man.
Okay, I'm
Okay.
saying.
On the surface, yeah, it's just an unspecified male individual. Simple enough.
Right.
However, from a data perspective, that choice, the indefinite article a versus, say, the man, or a specific identifier like, I don't know, subject 7 or John Doe, it's profoundly important.
How so?
A man tells us right away that the identity of this individual is either unknown to whoever did the observing,
Okay.
or, and this is perhaps more likely given the title pedestrian sighting, the identity is actually irrelevant to the purpose of the data collection itself.
So it's not about him specifically.
Probably not. It strongly points towards a focus on maybe pattern recognition or aggregate data. Think about it. If the goal was security, like tracking a suspect or law enforcement.
You expect the man.
Exactly. Or maybe some unique identifier. But a man, that suggests a more general, almost statistical purpose behind the observation.
Like counting or categorizing, not identifying?
Precisely. And consider the implications of that. This choice, a man, it immediately hints at data anonymization, doesn't it? Or at least person-agnostic data.
Okay, yeah.
The system or the process, whatever is recording this information, it's treating this individual as just a generic instance. An example, a pedestrian.
Just a type.
A type. And that's critical for applications like, say, urban planning. There, you're interested in the volume of people, the flow of pedestrians, not their individual life story.
Right. You don't need names to know if a sidewalk is too crowded.
Exactly. And it also has a huge bearing on privacy, of course. If all the recorded observations are just a man, a woman, a child, it makes it much, much harder to reverse engineer who specific individuals are.
Which is good, usually.
Which is often a core principle in ethical data collection, especially for public data sets. So this simple little word A, it tells us we're likely dealing with data intended for, broader analysis rather than highly targeted surveillance. So that's the whole context.
Wow. Okay, that's a crucial distinction just from the first word. It really shifts your thinking, doesn't it? From maybe a story about this guy to, well, a statistical input. It underlines the intent behind the data collection without needing a whole paragraph explaining it. Just A. That's a subtle clue about the scale, the purpose of the bigger data set this might belong to.
Indeed.
Okay, so let's move on. The next crucial part was spotted. Now, you could just say was seen, right? So why spotted? What can we glean from this specific verb choice, again, thinking about data?
Ah, yes, was spotted. Absolutely. This is another incredibly rich data point in itself because it shifts our focus, doesn't it?
About the seeing happen.
Exactly how the data point was generated. The core information is clear. It was an active observation. It happened in the past.
Yeah.
Simple. But when we dig into spotted, we uncover some fascinating possibilities about data quality, about the nature of the, let's call it the sensor.
The sensor, like a camera or person.
Could be either. That's the question it raises. See, spotted often implies a direct, maybe momentary act of seeing. Sometimes it carries a nuance of active detection, maybe even unexpectedness.
Like you weren't necessarily looking for it, but then, bang, you spotted it.
Sort of. Or maybe you were looking and you successfully detected it. It immediately raises the question, who or what did the spotting?
Oh.
Was it a human observer, someone standing there, maybe with a clipboard, maybe just noticing? If so, that immediately introduces potential, observational bias, doesn't it?
How so?
Well, humans are subjective. What one person considers spotting someone might differ from another. Maybe one person only notes people walking quickly, another notes everyone. If you have multiple human observers, you get into issues of inter-rater reliability. Is everyone spotting things the same way?
Right. The data could be inconsistent depending on who was working that day.
Exactly. The data then inherits a degree of human variability. It's not perfectly uniform.
Okay, so that's the human possibility. What's the alternative?
The alternative, and maybe this fits better with a formal document titled Pedestrian Sighting on Street, is that it could be an automated system.
Like a smart camera.
Precisely. Imagine a camera, probably networked, equipped with computer vision algorithms. In that context, was spotted could mean something very specific. An algorithm successfully detected an object within its field of view, classified it as a human, a man, and maybe noted its action walking, thereby triggering a data record.
So spotted becomes the system saying, detection confirmed.
Exactly, and that has massive implications for things like data consistency and scalability. An automated system can, operate 24/7. It doesn't get tired, doesn't get bored.
But it has its own issues.
Oh, absolutely. Its spotting capabilities are entirely limited by its programming, by the algorithms. It might miss someone partially hidden behind a car. It might misclassify an animal or a statue or struggle in bad weather or poor lighting.
So different kinds of potential errors than the human observer.
Different kinds, yes.
Right.
But potentially more systematic, more predictable errors, which you can sometimes account for. So this verb, spotted, it suggests a discrete event of recognition. A moment when something previously unnoticed or maybe just part of the background comes into focus or is identified by the system.
A transition.
A transition, yes, from unseen or unclassified to seen and, crucially, recorded. And that leads to the next question. Why was this specific act of spotting deemed noteworthy enough to be logged?
Yeah, people walk down streets all the time. Why write this one down?
Well, in a data system, was spotted might be what we call a trigger event. It signifies a confirmed detection that meets certain predefined criteria.
Like what?
For instance, a system might be configured to only spot and record objects that are definitively identified as human, are within a certain size range, and are in motion. It might be programmed to filter out static objects like parked cars or blowing trash or background noise.
So it's not just seeing, it's seeing, classifying, meeting criteria, and then recording.
Precisely. So what's spotted isn't just about someone seeing something casually. It points towards a system human or automated processing an input, making a determination that a relevant event has occurred, and deciding it should be formally recorded as data.
Wow. Okay, that's a profound shift in interpretation from just a simple verb. It really takes us from just a visual act to this potentially complex interplay of perception or maybe algorithmic classification.
Mm-hmm.
And each path, human or machine, carries its own set of strengths, weaknesses, potential biases. It really makes you think about the integrity in the data being collected, doesn't it?
It absolutely does. You have to consider the source of the spotting.
Okay, so what about the action itself? The man wasn't just standing there. He was spotted walking. What does walking tell us, data-wise?
Right, walking. This further refines our understanding of the event, again from that data perspective. The core information is obvious, isn't it? It describes the specific action, locomotion by foot,
Yeah, moving along.
but its inclusion specifies a particular mode of travel. And that allows for activity classification within a data set, which can be incredibly useful.
How so?
Well, walking signifies independent bipedal movement. In a data system, this is a crucial, let's call it a behavioral attribute.
Mm.
It immediately distinguishes this man's activity from, say, standing still or running or maybe cycling or driving a car or even being carried, I suppose.
Right, lots of ways to move down a street.
Exactly. And why is this distinction important? Because different modes of movement have very different implications for things like, well, urban planning again, or traffic management, or even security analysis.
Give me an example.
Okay, so a walking individual might be considered pretty low impact for vehicle traffic flow, right? But they're high impact for planning pedestrian zones or figuring out sidewalk wear and tear, or maybe crosswalk safety. Someone reported as running, however.
Might signal something different. An emergency. Exercise.
Could be anything, but it's a different data point, suggesting maybe higher speed, different intent perhaps. So classifying the type of movement is key. And when we think about data collection, especially through automated systems like computer vision,
The smart cameras again?
yeah, classifying walking versus standing or running actually requires quite sophisticated algorithms. These systems have to analyze sequences of video frames, looking for characteristic gaits, velocities, limb movements.
So the fact that the record says walking implies the system, if it was a system, successfully made that classification.
Correct. It implies a certain level of processing capability. It provides insight into the subject's dynamic state. They weren't static, and maybe their implied pace. Walking usually suggests a certain level of normalcy, doesn't it? A typicality for the environment being observed. It helps set a baseline.
A baseline.
Yeah. If most of the data points are walking, that establishes what's normal for that street at that time. If suddenly the data started showing lots of running or maybe standing in unusual places, that deviation from the baseline would be significant.
It flags anomaly.
Exactly. And this simple description, walking, it also provides a kind of temporal element.
How? It doesn't say for how long.
No, the duration is unspecified, true, but the action itself, walking, is clearly continuous in that moment of spotting. It's an ongoing process captured at a specific instant, which is fundamental if you're doing, say, time series analysis of pedestrian movement. You capture these snapshots of ongoing actions over time.
Okay, I see.
And the simplicity of the act, walking, it just underscores its commonality. That makes it a really valuable baseline for any kind of comparative analysis. If you're building a big data set of pedestrian activity, walking is probably going to be the most common action recorded.
So it's the bedrock data point.
In many ways, yes, it's representative of typical public space usage.
Okay, so we've got an unspecified male, a man, actively detected, was spotted by some observer or system performing a basic classified human action, walking. Now let's tie it all together with the final piece, down the street. This gives us the where, the crucial geospatial context, doesn't it?
It does. Crucial.
What can we learn from this phrase, down the street, particularly in terms of data?
Precisely. Down the street anchors the whole observation in a specific type of environment. It provides that essential geospatial context, or at least the beginnings of it. It's locational metadata, really.
Metadata.
The core information is, yes, the general location and the direction of the action. Let's break that down.
Like
The word street, what does that immediately imply?
a road, cars, buildings alongside, public space.
Exactly, a public thoroughfare. It places the event firmly in an urban or maybe suburban setting. It's a common stage for daily life. And crucially, as you said, it's a space generally accessible to others and often subject to public monitoring, whether by people or systems.
Not inside a private house or a gated community.
Right. It's not a private residence, not usually a park interior, not a specific shop floor, though maybe the sidewalk in front of a shop. It's that interstitial public space, the network that connects places. From a data perspective, this defines the scope of the observation very clearly. Data collected on the street usually adheres to certain legal and ethical frameworks regarding surveillance in public spaces.
Okay, that makes sense. What about the down the part?
Good point. Down the street, that provides a directional component. It indicates movement along a path.
Not just existing on the street, but moving along it.
Precisely. It implies purpose, maybe, or at least progression, however minor that progression might be. It's not standing on the street corner or crossing the street, but moving along its length. Down could imply direction relative to the observer, or maybe relative to traffic flow, or even topography, though it's usually just idiomatic for along.
Yeah.
Now, in a really robust data system, this general directionality down the street would likely be refined. It might be translated into specific coordinates, maybe a start and end point if tracked for a moment, or perhaps a directional vector like moving northeast.
Getting much more technical.
Yes. Think about concepts like geofencing. That's where you define virtual boundaries on a map. A pedestrian sighting on street could be data generated specifically when a detected person crosses into or moves within a predefined geofenced area, say a particular block, or a sensitive zone near a school.
So the location might be much more specific in the background data.
Almost certainly. And notice the phrasing again. The street. Just like a man, it's generic. It doesn't say Main Street or Elm Street.
Right. Consistent anonymity or generalization.
It contributes to that overall generic feel, suggesting this could be data from any street where such observation is deemed relevant. It reinforces that idea of a system designed for broader, maybe aggregated data, rather than focusing on highly localized specific incidents necessarily.
So you're saying behind the scenes?
Behind the scenes, in any real-world system generating this kind of data today, the street would almost certainly be accompanied by precise GPS coordinates, or at least a very specific location identifier, and, crucially, a timestamp.
Time and place.
Absolutely essential. That transforms it from just a vague description into highly specific, actionable metadata. Time, latitude, longitude. And that data, the location and time, can then be overlaid onto GIS maps, Geographic Information System maps.
For what purpose?
Endless purposes. Detailed spatial analysis. You can identify pedestrian bottlenecks at certain times of day, find unsafe street crossings that need signals, pinpoint areas needing better lighting at night based on where people are walking, analyze how new construction impacts foot traffic.
Wow.
A street is a fundamental element of a city's network topology, isn't it? It's a conduit. And it's a place where countless data points like this, a man walking, are probably being generated, maybe constantly, contributing to this huge dynamic understanding of urban life.
So, okay, let's try and put this all back together. When we look at it not just as a sentence, but as this meticulously recorded data point, even if it looks simple.
Yeah.
We've gone from a man was spotted walking down the street to inferring all these potential layers. Anonymization, observer, methodology, human versus machine, activity and classification, geospatial context, metadata, potential triggers. Actually a surprising amount of detail, or at least potential detail, and a lot of inference about the nature and the purpose of the data collection itself, all from what seemed like the simplest, most throwaway statement.
It's quite packed when you unpack it.
It really is. But now, let's zoom out a bit from the sentence itself. Given this sheer simplicity, this apparent triviality of one guy walking, why would it even be recorded in something formally titled Pedestrian Sighting on Street? What does the existence of such a record and that title tell us about the broader purpose, the significance behind documenting these seemingly tiny events?
Right. This is where we connect that granular analysis we just did back up to the much bigger picture. And you're right, the very existence of this excerpt, a man was spotted walking down the street, nestled within a document titled Pedestrian Sighting on Street. That's incredibly telling in itself.
What does it tell you?
It highlights, I think, the profound importance of data, even the most granular, seemingly insignificant data, when it's part of a systematic collection effort. It's not just a random note someone jotted down.
The system matters.
The system is key.
Yeah.
Let's consider that act of recording itself. The core insight here is that this specific sighting, this mundane event, was deemed worthy of being captured, recorded, logged, probably in a formal or semi-formal document or database. And that title, Pedestrian sighting on street is so crucial because it strongly indicates a systematic approach. This isn't just a one-off observation someone found interesting. It implies a structured process is in place. A defined context exists where the simple act of a pedestrian moving in a public space is relevant enough to warrant formal documentation.
There's a reason why they're recording this stuff.
There must be, and that immediately opens up a whole spectrum of possibilities for the purpose behind this data collection. Why would an organization or maybe an individual researcher or a city department, why would they compile pedestrian sightings?
We touched on urban planning.
Urban planning is a huge one, yes. City planners absolutely need to understand foot traffic patterns. How else do you design efficient sidewalks, safe crosswalks, decide where to put public plazas or bus stops or train station entrances?
You need the numbers.
You need the numbers, the locations, the times. Knowing where, when, and roughly how many people are walking can inform crucial decisions about zoning laws, about public transit routes, even about where to put public amenities like benches or water fountains or waste receptacles.
So one man walking doesn't tell you much.
No, but aggregate thousands of those sightings over time, and suddenly you can see peak pedestrian hours for a specific street corner. Which then allows the city to, say, optimize the traffic light timings for pedestrian crossing phases during those peak hours, or maybe deploy additional public safety officers during particularly busy periods like near stadiums after an event.
Makes sense. What else besides planning?
Well, think about retail analytics. Businesses, especially brick-and-mortar stores, are obsessed with footfall.
Right. How many people walk past the shop?
Exactly. They track it to understand potential customer traffic. A new store might literally choose its location based on pedestrian density data. Marketing campaigns, like handing out flyers or putting up signs, could be timed to coincide with periods of high pedestrian activity identified through this kind of data.
Okay, commercial uses too.
Definitely. And then there's security monitoring. We talked about anonymity, but even anonymized data is useful here. While it might not identify individuals, tracking the general flow of pedestrians helps establish that baseline of normal activity we mentioned.
The normal rhythm of the street.
Yes. So any significant deviation from that baseline, like a sudden unexplained surge in people, or maybe a street being completely empty when it's usually busy, that could automatically flag an anomaly for further investigation by security personnel or police.
It's like an early warning system based on crowd behavior.
In a way, yes. It's the difference between seeing one bird fly by and using radar to understand the migration patterns of an entire flock and noticing when that pattern is disrupted.
Got it. Any other applications?
Oh, sure. This kind of data could feed into demographic studies, maybe correlating pedestrian flows with census data for neighborhood analysis, or even public health initiatives.
How?
Well, understanding where and when people walk can help inform initiatives trying to promote walking for exercise and health. Or it could identify areas where pedestrian infrastructure, sidewalks, lighting, crossings is poor or lacking, which might indicate safety hazards that need fixing.
So preventing accidents before they happen, maybe?
Potentially, yes.
Yeah.
The key thing is, the act of recording this simple event transforms it. It takes something fleeting, transient, a man walking past, and makes it into a persistent, retrievable piece of data.
It gives it permanence.
Permanence and utility within a larger system. This single line, a man was spotted walking down the street, could realistically be the most basic unit of information, the foundational data point in a huge data pipeline.
A pipeline.
Yeah, a system that collects, processes, analyzes, and stores data. This is the raw input. When you combine this one point with thousands, maybe millions, of similar points collected over time and space, that's when you can form a comprehensive picture.
Right.
Think about a scientist meticulously recording the result of one single unembellished experimental trial, or an economist logging one single market transaction price. Each one starts as a singular observation, maybe seems insignificant alone.
But together.
Together, they contribute to a larger understanding. They enable complex models, predictions, insights. So this single line isn't just a description of a guy walking. It's very likely an essential artifact, a product of a sophisticated data collection process operating in the background.
That's powerful. It really reframes the mundane, doesn't it?
Yeah.
It suggests that even the most everyday observation can be like a single brick, essential for building something much larger, much more complex. It's like you said, maybe a single pixel in a vast, intricate digital image, completely unremarkable on its own, maybe even invisible up close, but absolutely indispensable for the picture as a whole.
A good analogy.
And it really makes you rethink what we consider important information, because this sighting on its own, it feels so, well, undramatic, boring
It
almost.
does like drama.
But you seem to be arguing that its very lack of drama might be its strength in a data context.
Mm,
The normality is what makes it valuable.
precisely. Yes. Let's really dig into that. The profound value of the undramatic. The core insight here is, as we've said, the event itself is clearly not sensational. It's not extraordinary.
No headlines here.
No headlines, no mention of an accident, a crime, a celebrity sighting, nothing that would typically grab our attention. Yet, as you point out, this deep dive really underscores that information doesn't need to be sensational to be incredibly valuable. In fact, I'd argue that often the true power lies not in those isolated, dramatic, outlier events, but in the systematic collection and, crucially, the aggregation of many, many simple, seemingly unremarkable facts like this one.
It's the quantity and consistency that matters.
Quantity, consistency, and the baseline they establish. Because these aggregated facts are what ultimately reveal the larger patterns, the trends, the actionable insights that are simply invisible if you only look at single instances, especially if you only look at the dramatic ones.
Yeah, the ordinary to recognize the extraordinary.
Exactly. To truly understand what is abnormal or noteworthy or changing, you first have to establish a comprehensive baseline of what is normal, what is typical.
And a man walking is about as typical as it gets on a street.
It's pretty much the definition of baseline pedestrian activity. So this single sighting, when combined with hundreds or thousands of similar sightings, each with its timestamp and location, that's what could reveal those predictable traffic flows, the common routes commuters take, maybe even demographic distributions of walkers at different times of day, or the impact of external factors like how does rain affect foot traffic on this street, or what happens when there's a festival nearby.
You can only see that by comparing to the normal pattern.
Absolutely. Without these millions of undramatic data points forming that baseline, any analysis of pedestrian behavior would just be, well, guesswork, anecdotal evidence, maybe gut feeling, ultimately unreliable for serious planning or analysis.
So the mundane is the foundation for reliable insight.
It really is. Think about the concept of time series data again. Collecting a man was spotted walking down the street over and over, same place, different times, or same time, different places, with those precise timestamps and locations. That allows us to track changes over time.
Like, are more or fewer people walking downtown this year compared to last year?
Exactly.
Oh.
Or how does foot traffic shift between 9 a.m. on a Tuesday and 9 a.m. on a Saturday? Or between morning and evening rush hours? This kind of longitudinal analysis, built entirely on simple, repetitive, undramatic observations, is fundamental for everything from local business planning to economic forecasting, even things like predicting the potential spread of airborne infectious diseases in public spaces.
Wow.
And the undramatic nature of the individual data point is actually protective in a way. It ensures that the overall picture isn't constantly skewed by rare outlier events. It provides a robust, stable foundation for analysis.
That's a really interesting point. We focus so much on the exceptions, the big news.
We do. We live in a world that's saturated with information, right?
Yeah.
And so much of it is deliberately sensationalized to grab our limited attention.
For sure. Clickbait everywhere.
Exactly. So the ability to actually pause and distill and appreciate the weight, the significance of a fundamental, unembellished fact, that's becoming a crucial skill, I think, a critical thinking skill.
Seeing the value in the plain statement.
Yes. It forces us to question our own assumptions about what really constitutes important information. We're naturally drawn to the extraordinary, the novel, the dramatic. But the ordinary, when it's systematically observed and recorded like this, that forms the bedrock of our understanding of how the world actually works on a day-to-day basis. Just consider, for a moment, all the countless everyday occurrences that normally go unrecorded in our own lives, like the precise number of steps you take between your door and the bus stop, the exact time you pass a certain landmark on your commute every day, the specific color of every single car you see on that commute.
Total background noise. We filter it out.
We filter it out because it seems insignificant, right? But those details, even though they seem trivial on their own, they collectively form the rich, detailed tapestry of our daily lives. And increasingly, they actually form the raw input for the predictive models that shape our world, from traffic apps to online advertising. This single, simple record, a man was spotted walking down the street. It gives us just a tiny glimpse into a world where such details are systematically collected. often for purposes far grander, far more complex than the individual observation itself might suggest. It highlights this often invisible infrastructure of data collection and analysis that underpins so much of our modern urban and digital experience.
The hidden layer of observation.
That hidden layer, yes. And this leads us really to an important question for you, our listener, to think about. When you consider such a fundamental, basic piece of information like this, what stands out to you now? How often do we, in our own lives, overlook the potential significance, the latent information in observations just because they seem too simple, too common, too undramatic?
Do we miss the patterns in our own lives?
It really challenges us to reevaluate our perception of what constitutes meaningful data, doesn't it? Both out there in the world and maybe closer to home.
That is, yeah, that's a truly thought-provoking challenge.
Yeah.
It feels like we've just taken a microscope to what looked like a single drop of plain water and suddenly discovered this entire complex ecosystem swimming inside it. An ecosystem of data implications, methodologies, potential uses. From just 5 words, a man was spotted walking down the street, pulled from a document titled Pedestrian Sighting on Street. We've done more than just explore the nuances of observation. We've really dug into the fundamental components of factual reporting, the different methodologies of data collection, the potential biases, and this quiet, often overlooked but really immense power of simple, aggregated data.
It's the foundation.
It really seems to be. We've taken this deep dive into not just what was explicitly stated in those 5 words, but maybe more importantly, how it might have been stated or recorded, and critically, what the very act of its recording implies for these much broader contexts, like, as you said, urban planning, maybe security, retail, behavioral analytics.
The list goes on.
It really goes to show, doesn't it, that even the most minimal source material, the most seemingly unremarkable piece of information, can contain layers upon layers of potential insight. If you just know where to look, how to ask the right questions, and if you're willing to apply that analytical rigor to really unpack it.
Curiosity and a systematic approach.
Yeah. It's a testament, I think, to the idea that information, really in almost any form, has inherent value if you approach it with that kind of mindset.
And perhaps to leave you with a final thought to ponder until our next deep dive. This whole exploration, it really does challenge us to consider something personally, doesn't it?
Which is?
If so much potential meaning, so much inference can be gleaned from such a brief, almost incidental observation of a man walking down the street, then what unnoticed, seemingly insignificant details are you encountering every single day in your commute, in your work, in your neighborhood? Details that, maybe upon closer inspection, might hold profound, unexamined truths about your own world.
The data of our own lives.
Exactly. What patterns might emerge in your own life or in your own immediate environment if we all paid just a little closer, maybe more analytical attention to the simplest facts, the things that constantly surround us, and then took that next step. Considered how those seemingly isolated, mundane data points could actually connect, how they might be contributing silently to form a larger, more significant story.
What grander narratives are hidden in our daily routines?
Precisely. Think about the mundane observations you make every day and just wonder, what larger systems might they be feeding into? What stories might they be telling if only we collected enough of them and started looking for the patterns? Something to think about.